First off, the room we're in, how big is it?
So the room that the layout is situated in is roughly 15.5 feet wide by 46 feet, I think is 46 or 47 feet long.
How many layouts have you had in here?
This layout that we're looking at right now is my second layout. My first layout started off as kind of a U-shape layout, which consisted of 3 4x8 sheets of plywood. It slowly grew to 36 feet in length with a few additions of a couple other 4x8 sheets of plywood. And it was situated up against the west side of the wall and extended 8 feet out into the room. I had that for about 5 or 6 years before I decided to make better use of the space, and this layout that I'm currently working on has been under construction for give or take 5 years.
We're looking at what you call the branch line and a yard in here. What's the story? Why are you doing it this way?
So the original track plan for this layout has changed numerous times. The branch line, however, has kind of stayed the same more or less. And the idea of this industrial park section of the branch line was just to have a bunch of smaller industries that will take a variety of different cars. I plan on adding another track or siding and shifting some of the tracks over so that I can actually have and classify it as a smaller yard, as I will have eventually a large transload facility which is going to receive numerous cars and be switched out constantly. So that's the main idea behind the industrial park on the branch line, is just to take a variety of different cars and kind of give an area on the layout that will require some thinking in terms of how you're going to switch out the cars and maneuver around your train and so forth.
So we're looking at this space with the log cars. What's going in here?
So this is going to be, as of right now, a pulp mill. This is going to be one of the main industries on my layout in terms of like a complete scene. So it's going to be set up somewhat prototypically, where it'll receive box cars on one track. There'll be a chemical storage track and a chemical unload track. And this will be switched out fairly regularly. There will be a designated train that comes here, drops off cars, switches out those cars, and leaves again. And I anticipate an obsession that this particular industry will see upwards of 4 trains and 4 different operators switching out the industry.
Give me an idea. What are we going to be in an era of the beehive burner, or are we later than that?
That's yet to be decided. The lumber mill and the pulp mill and eventually some of the other industries are going to be kind of modeled, or are going to take some inspiration from the BCR railway. And so there's going to be a prototypical BCR wood chip wood chip loader. And it will take a variety of cars from that time. This layout is going to be mainly modern. However, I'm willing to kind of stretch back in time to accommodate some of the cars that aren't actually running anymore. As some people may know, the BCR wood chip hoppers actually aren't even in service anymore because they've switched to pellet hoppers instead. So I'll use some of my artistic license in that sense to be able to accommodate those different types of cars. Okay, so the lower yard is kind of considered the main yard. So in terms of in relation, I guess, to the real world, this would be your main large terminals such as Thornton Yard or Walker Yard in BC and Alberta, for those of you who are unfamiliar with those terms. And this is going to be it's going to be an interchange point. It's going to be a staging point. There's going to be numerous switchers running around, lots of action within this yard, the reconfiguration of trains and the building of trains to go to different parts of the layout. How this differs from the upper yard is that the upper yard is, as I've mentioned, is a staging point, so there's really not a whole lot of action that occurs up there. It'll be a lot of just running around the train, going back down the way you came. And then, as I mentioned, the freight trains will be kind of switched around a little bit. But the biggest part about the lower level yard is the fact that it has a car shop, a turntable, and it also has a very large engine facility. So that differs substantially from the upper level yard, which will only have a refueling track and a back track for the engines to refuel, and then obviously if there's any damaged cars or faulty rolling stock, they'll be put on the back track. The engine facility is quite large by comparison to the upper level engine track, and there will be, eventually there will be 3 ready tracks, which will be the tracks that engines will sit on once they've been refueled, sanded, and serviced. And then there is also 3 longer shop tracks which will have an engine house, and there will be The engine house will eventually be open on one side once I build it, of course, and you'll be able to see all the details inside, and there'll be an open pit and that sort of thing. So it'll be quite a dynamic scene. There'll be lots going on. There'll be refueling station, sanding station, and so forth. And then the car shop's a little simpler, and it's just going to consist of 2 tracks where, again, faulty rolling stock, or in terms of operating, you might actually have cars assigned to that as faulty rolling stock, even though they might not be, just to add another switching component to the op sessions. And then the turntable, as I mentioned earlier, is just going to be, it's not going to be used often. However, it's just a place to, I guess, prototypically turn engines around if need be, rather than having to pick them up and turn them around by hand, which I was doing previously during the op sessions. So there'll be lots going on in this yard. There'll be trains being made up for the branch line. There'll be trains being made for the upper level industries and upper level yard, as well as trains being switched around that will eventually go to the port and so forth. So, like I said, lots going on, lots of operators required to handle this yard. The upper yard is more of a staging yard. This is the kind of turnaround point for the layout. So especially unit trains, they are going to come up here. The power is going to have to run around the train, and the operators can either decide to take the same train back down or take a different set of cars. The freight trains that come up here may be switched around a little bit because of the industries on the upper level, such as the pulp mill and the lumber mill. So there's a main pulp mill, and then there's a lumber mill, which is a smaller industry, which is eventually going to receive bulkhead flat cars, center beam flat cars, wood chip hoppers, and a few box cars occasionally for some of the more sensitive lumber, which needs to be shielded from the elements. And
So you're talking about an operating session, operators, and how many people do you think you're going to be able to handle here as far as operating this layout?
well, that will be determined as time goes on. I'm really not sure. I've had some op sessions in the past where I've had quite a few guys up here running trains, and it does get a little bit crowded, does get a little bit chaotic with so many trains running on the layout. However, as soon as I establish op sessions and in terms of actual operations for trains going to certain points and having to switch certain industries and having people assigned to those jobs, I think it will cut down on a little bit of the mayhem, and I can probably operate upwards of 6, 7, or 8 guys, even depending on how well I organize the op session. I anticipate that not all 8 will be operating at the same time. There will be some downtime for the operators when their trains come to their final destination before they're assigned to their next job. However, I believe I could probably get upwards of 8 different operations going within one op session. I'd like to get this layout to a point where I'm actually starting scenery and installing trees and, you know, rock faces. I may not ever finish this layout, just given the size of it. This is quite an undertaking for me, and I have a lot of help with from my friends. However, for the majority of it, I work up here alone and just pick at it as I find time to do so. So I don't know. I'd like to get it to a point where it looks like it's nearing completion, but maybe the fine details won't quite show through by that point. So we'll see. I'll try and get it as far as I can.